Okay, so welcome everybody. Today we are honored to host Tyler Cowen. Tyler Cowen is a professor of economics at George Mason University, where he specializes in monetary theory and welfare economics. He's a prolific author who has written more than 17 books. His most recent book is titled Big Business: A Love Letter to an American Anti-Hero, and he's also the co-founder of the popular economics blog Marginal Revolution. Welcome, Tyler.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. We just start? Okay.
Yeah, feel free to start. Yep.
My talk is on artificial intelligence and classical liberalism. And over the last few years, I've been trying to think through how what I call strong AI will influence the prospects for liberty. There's now many discussions of AI. Too much of it, in my view, is about will it destroy us? There's another whole substrand of discussion. Will it destroy all of our jobs? I'll just start by saying I'm not going to really cover either of those topics. I don't feel I have anything to say on them that's new. On neither am I especially pessimistic. And I guess if it does destroy us all, everything else I will say will be wrong. But let's proceed under the presumption that it won't, because if it does, it's not going to matter. So there are quite a few different angles of how strong artificial intelligence will intersect with the law and intersect with liberty. Let me start with just some very mundane ones that I think should receive more attention. So if you look at, say, the United States defense sector, in the last 5 or so years, we see that Anduril and Palantir have really a much more important role than had been the case earlier. There were no two companies comparable to those. You had big companies, like Boeing and Lockheed, and you had smaller contractors. But to have truly major innovators who are doing things the government itself could not do, the landscape there has changed quite a bit recently. And some of the innovations of Anduril and Palantir are AI, not all of them by any means. But I think this has come first to the defense sector. And over time, we will see it come to many different parts of government. So any part of government that has, for instance, a website that involves anything resembling big data, and if you think about the major programs, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, managing government debt, of course, they all involve plenty of big data. There's a report that quite soon, OpenAI in some form will embed its contribution into an iPhone. So I think we can expect a world, in less than 5 years, where most stuff that we interact with, it's not like eating an apple, most stuff has AI in it. So most government stuff also in some way will have AI in it. And I think over time, more and more of the value of how we interact with government will be in the AI, not in the labor personnel. So if you need to call up the Social Security Administration and ask about your lost check, that will be done by AI at some point. So we're going to have a rather extreme privatization of government functions, I think, by a kind of stealth. I don't think it will be much debated in public. But the practical reality is, while government can build poorly designed websites, I don't think they really can compete by building workable AI systems at all. So just this mass privatization is on its way. Now, it's not an ideal libertarian kind of privatization. For instance, there's not truly competitive contracting. There's not an obvious kind of profit and loss system whereby the government activities might come and go. So it will be a kind of crony capitalist, cost plus accounting, semi-oligopolistic contracting form of privatization. I think the odds are still it will be much better than what we have now. Recently did my taxes, as I'm sure most of you have done, and I had to interact with the IRS website. This was a nightmare. A lot of the time it simply was down. It asked me to upload different things. Took a long time for that to work. And again, one feels even pre-AI, this is something the private sector could have managed pretty readily. So I think that's just the first change. Is government personnel will diminish in number radically, and government will become much more dependent on private companies. So there'll be a very odd dynamic. I'm not sure if the government being dependent on private companies shifts the balance of power toward the government or toward the companies, because the companies in turn will be more dependent on the federal government. And furthermore, the federal government is both negotiating with them and regulating them or threatening to regulate them. That strikes me as an uneasy dynamic. So again, I don't feel this will be any kind of libertarian paradise sort of future, but I do think it's going to make a big difference. And even questions such as, well, military recruiting, or who is accepted, to join the Marines, who is allowed to become a police officer, just crime enforcement decisions, more and more and more of what happens in government, again, will be turned over to the private sector in some manner. This has some other implications. So if AI is embedded in many different things, if you think about international trade, for instance, when we either trade services or you could call it foreign direct investment, if the American homegrown AI is simply there, say in Europe, doing things, but so many systems around the world, in the absence of some other change, will be managed by American companies rather than, say, French bureaucrats or South Korean software makers. The American lead in AI is probably with us for at least some moderate period of time, maybe for a long period of time. Just as our lead in tech companies appears to be pretty robust, in some ways it's growing. So all services, it seems to me, or most services, when traded across borders, first there'll just be a lot more trade of services. That's good. We haven't really managed that in a long time. But there will be privacy issues and national security issues embedded in so much more of international trade and international investment. And I don't actually foresee this necessarily going well. So the European Union is already fairly cranky on how it wants to regulate artificial intelligence. Some of this, though it's not stated, does come from the fact that these are
Tyler, you hit your
I
mute
think you're
button.
muted. You need to unmute.
for how long?
Now we can hear you.
Okay.
About 30
So
seconds.
services traded across borders, they will be from American companies because of AI. And when they're traded to, say, Europe or South Korea, there will be a privacy issue. Where is the data sent? And also a national security issue that even if you're an ally of the United States, you may not want things to be entirely dependent on the whims of either the American government or a few American companies. So on one hand, the opportunity to trade services through AI without goods or humans having to cross borders, that's going to be much, much higher. But on the other hand, all of this trade will be fraught with national security fears and privacy fears. So trade law as we know it, I think, will be very, very different. And I was mentioning, as we got cut off, the United States is on the verge of banning TikTok or forcing its divestiture. Whether or not you agree, enough people feel that should not be handed over to a Chinese company. And obviously, many countries around the world are going to react that way to the United States. Again, in some cases, even our allies. So there will be many, many more TikTok issues to come. And I think one effect of this will be to increase the relative prosperity of countries with homegrown AI. That, at least in relative terms, will help the United States. It's not clear to me in absolute terms it will make us richer. We would be better off with freer trade, as is usually the case. But our most important export, it will be fairly limited how much a lot of countries want to take us up on it. one thing I expect we'll see is foreign governments which will make a greater effort to home grow their AI. France, in particular, is doing this. And then ex post, I don't know that they would formally nationalize those companies, but they would bring them under the ambit of the government, have government individuals appointed to the board, maybe labor unions, regulate them heavily, have government as a major customer. So if you're a French AI company, say Mistral, and you're operating in France, last I looked, I think the French government was 56% of GDP, something like that. Well, of course, they're your number one customer, and you stand in relation to them. They have a funny monopsony kind of power over you. And we're going to have these very segmented AI markets where probably the American product, maybe also the Chinese product, is much better than the rest of the world. And the rest of the world, at least many of the countries, will operate with a kind of AI autarky, I call it. I think piled on top of this will be open source systems, which are most likely to come from both America and China. And they will be far more popular in the very poor countries, in part because they're free, in part because they can be customized, and in part because some versions of the open systems even work without internet connections. So they will be everywhere. May not count as a form of trade. It may just be they're downloaded and then altered. But a big question will be, well, will it be American open source systems that spread throughout the world, or will it be Chinese? That depends in part on our cultural diplomacy, but it also depends in part on our legislation. There are many bills introduced before Congress and in many of the US states to, in essence, ban open source AI from becoming a significant force. If any of those bills happen to pass, I think the end result would be a lot of the rest of the world will be operating with Chinese open source. I view this as a negative for liberty and classical liberalism. It would be a relative positive if they operate with the American open source. But that's a whole other set of issues. Again, I just don't see them being discussed much. If I were a trade economist, I would be excited and a bit terrified at the notion that a big part of my field was going to be radically different within the next 10 years. When governments regulate AI, and right now our government does not very much directly regulate AI, but over time, the regulatory decisions we make today will just be very, very important. So if you think of all of your internet connections, all of your software, a lot of the hardware in your home, your car, most of the stuff you own, if it has embedded AI, and if AI serves as a kind of operating system, any regulations we put on AI, it seems to me, become the government regulating almost everything. So this is one reason why I think we should be very, very cautious in regulating AI. It's very hard to predict exactly how the future will look, but whatever regulations we put in place, we all know it's very difficult to remove them. So I think we end up in a situation where quite blindly, we're going to, if we regulate much at all, be regulating most goods and services to come in the future and not really know what we're doing. So my preference is to have, sector-specific regulations when appropriate, but AI is a thing not regulate at all. But that strikes me as a potentially grave danger for classical liberalism and ideas of freedom in this new world. Another issue I've been thinking about, talking to people about, I call it the AI teddy bear. So some of you may know the old Spielberg movie AI, where there's a kid in the movie, I think it's Hallie Osment, and he carries around a teddy bear that is also an AI. Currently on the market, very new, there are some AI teddy bears. I know two parents who own them. They're not yet very impressed with the current versions, but in essence, a kid after some age will have access to, whether it's a teddy bear or whatever form it takes, a thing it can carry around. The AI teddy bear can teach your child anything your child might care to learn. The AI teddy bear could teach your kid to be, fluent in Chinese at age 5 or 6, if that's what you nudge toward. The AI teddy bear can cheer up your kid, monitor your kid. It seems to me that reactions to the AI teddy bear are going to be very emotional. So I wouldn't say I have specific predictions, but I think parents will demand regulation. And how we regulate AI teddy bears, it may be done emotionally, but it's also going to be, in essence, the future of regulating a lot of education. Because if you think of education to come, at least the private version of it, most of it will have embodied AI. So if we regulate the AI teddy bears, we're also regulating education at the same time, again, without necessarily intending to do that or to know it. Now, what kind of regulations might be debated when it comes to the AI teddy bears? One option, it seems to me, which I think I would personally support, is simply a notion that if you sell an AI teddy bear in the marketplace, you need to make it transparent to parents what the AI teddy bear does and does not do. Now, that's rather complicated because the smarter is artificial intelligence, the harder it is to make transparent, most of all to dumber beings such as we humans, what the thing actually does. As we know from algorithms, even simpler algorithms from machine learning, there's not a simple way to make those transparent to outside observers or even to the researchers themselves. I find it's now common, I'll read an economics piece with machine learning, never be given any economic intuition and told the best model has, tens of millions of variables. Whatever you think of that as an economist, it's here to stay. So while in principle I favor transparency for the AI teddy bear, I'm not sure what that actually should mean. Another set of liberties issues from this actually concern the liberties of children. Now, I don't have a very clear, well thought out stance on what are the limits of parental control versus the rights of the child, but most of us would agree parents cannot simply beat and abuse their own children. Well, what if parents take the AI teddy bear and use it for some form of mind control, make the child a member of some dogmatic religion, use the AI teddy bear to punish the child if the child is doing things the parent doesn't want the child to do? There would, in fact, be complete surveillance of the child by the AI teddy bear, which is going to be controlled by the parents. So should there be limits on how parents can use AI teddy bears to control their children? Again, I don't think I have a very good answer here. It just seems to me we're not discussing this enough. And I think there'll be a lot of pretty good AI teddy bears out there, again, in less than 5 years. This is not science fiction. There are AI teddy bears now. They just need to be a bit better. So the kid loves the AI teddy bear like it might love a red fire truck or a book on dinosaurs. It's possible AI teddy bears just won't be a thing with kids at all. But actually, I think a lot of children would want them. And if I were a kid today, in fact, I would want an AI teddy bear to teach me all kinds of things. I would say, like starting at age 6 or 7, I feel I would have been pretty obsessed to have an AI teddy bear. I was a big baseball fan. I collected baseball cards. I would want the AI teddy bear to tell me everything about baseball. So I think there's going to be a pretty strong kid demand for this. How that interacts with what parents want, what the law will allow, I think will be very complicated. And also the AI teddy bears, presumably they're portable, right? They don't even have to be connected to the internet to be pretty good once open source progresses a bit more. So if you have AI teddy bears crossing state lines, crossing borders with countries, what really regulations on AI teddy bears can do at all and how it can be enforced, that too is an open question. So I think, what you would call classical liberal thought in the very near future faces really some pretty major questions that I don't think we're very well equipped to discuss. I would stress my intuitions based on long and bitter experience are simply to think there are a large number of problems made worse by government regulation and not better. But as a social scientist, I don't feel I should believe that a priori. And I'm certainly in favor of laws, say, that prohibit parents from beating their children. But what to do on these issues of trade, privatization of government services, how AI will disrupt relations between parents and children, that social disruption, A related set of issues, again, these are products that exist now. I just don't think they're very good now, but I think they'll be very good very soon, not even in 5 years, maybe in 1 year. But those are these little devices. You can hang it on a chain and it records your entire life. Now, as you all know, in the United States, there's one party and two party recording states. In two party recording states, you need the permission of both parties to record. Not always enforced very well. But as you also probably know, there are more one party recording states than there are two party recording states. So if people want to record themselves, their entire life, or at least their interactions with other people, and have a searchable record of that, should all states become two-party consent recording states? I think that is the case, but there's also an enforcement issue. Obviously, the recording device can quite easily become invisible. So there's some world, in a way it's here already. You can be recorded on an iPhone, but in terms of having a lot of data that you can access and order immediately with AI, I think this will become more of an issue. You'll have some number of people that record their entire lives and everything you say to them is on tape. And just socially, how will this evolve? Legally, how will it evolve? Will everyone be afraid to say what they actually think? There's an alternative equilibrium where I think some people will actually be more direct. They'll pursue what I call the Mark Andreessen strategy, which is just say what you think, let people get used to it, and go your merry way. It doesn't have to be the majority strategy, but we might get this weird bifurcation where a lot of people just clam up with other humans. And then other people go, the Mark Andreessen strategy route. But what privacy means in this world, typically with past technologies, I haven't been a big believer in formal rights of privacy. My view has been, I think, correct up until now, that modernity gives you more privacy than village life. Privacy is never perfect. You don't, in any case, own what other people think of you. So let's not have too much privacy legislation. But I think we're possibly getting to the point where you could potentially lose so much privacy that may not be the correct view anymore. And for instance, to protect individuals against just being recorded all the time or that information being used against you is something we will need to consider. Also visually, and this has implications for scholars, I think especially historians, along some time horizon, if you believe Mark Zuckerberg, and I suppose I do, we are led to believe there will be glasses you can wear that basically will record everything you're seeing. So privacy implications aside, if you're a historian, what you can do is go to, say the Hoover Archives, just read things, and then have a complete record of what you've read. You could quite easily have a complete record of everything you read in life, and that would be searchable through AI. You could even fine-tune a bot on what, John Cochrane has read. That to me would be extremely useful, actually, in my work and research. I think it's coming pretty soon, not in the next year or two, but I think maybe in the next 10 years. So just the notion of sort of close to perfect memory being a kind of option in many spheres of life, and what that will change, not just our casual chats with other people, but all the information we take in. You could say like the depreciation function on this information, the rate of depreciation goes to zero. And in this world where you have more memory, what does that look like? And, not just the partial equilibrium, oh, you can access anything you've read. There's arguably a general equilibrium effect. Maybe some number of people specialize in being readers and they sell you their programs and you don't have to read at all. They do the reading for you. And when you need to, you just ask their bot different questions because they've read it and it's stored in their AI. So how exactly that all is going to happen, again, seems to me like, in a way, a simple microeconomic problem, but very hard to come up with a simple prediction for. Last topic I'll just cover. This is one I do hear discussed a lot. It does intersect with concerns of liberty, but that's just media and politics. What do media and politics mean in an AI-infused world? So one option that I think many people will choose is to wake up in the morning and receive an AI digest of all their feeds rather than go through all the feeds. As it stands right now, I wake up in the morning, I go through all my feeds. It takes me an hour. I enjoy that hour. I'm not one of the people looking to migrate out of that, but I think a lot of people do want to migrate out of that. And rather than spend the hour going through their WhatsApp messages, what's on Twitter, their email, they'll just get a digest and spend maybe 5 minutes with the digest. There's potentially a cannibalization problem here. And just our information flows, they seem to become very dependent on the digest. I don't think that has to be a bad thing. So there's competition to make the digest useful and to make the digest informative. But say, for instance, I apply AI to Twitter and I just say to my bot, oh, I'm going to wake up in the morning, just show me the 7 tweets that I'm going to find interesting. If enough people do that, it seems that Twitter or X now, as an ongoing business concern, has a problem that everything becomes disintermediated. If I say, read the New York Times for me, you know which of the New York Times pieces I don't like, just show me the 3 good ones. I'm pretty sure it can do that now. I don't think it really needs any advance, just needs a product out there. So, further radicalizing disintermediation, what are you left with in a sense that can cover the fixed costs of gathering information in the first place? Deep fakes, I see discussed a great deal at great length. Every dinner party I go to, there's a long discussion on this topic. I was at one of these last night. It actually doesn't bother me that much. I think the real problem in politics is just politicians outright lying, like people saying, oh, Obama wasn't born in the US. They didn't need an AI deepfake to do that. Both sides lie about all kinds of things. The constraint is on the circulation, the attention, and the demand side, and lowering the cost of lying with a supposedly foolproof documentation. I think I'm actually predicting it's not going to matter that much. Demand side is what's constraining the market. But again, at least something to think about. That is 27 minutes. I was told about 30. There's always more to say, but that's a lot to put on the table. And why don't we turn things over now to questions?
Thank you, Tyler. That was great. We have a question by Ken Judd, and then
Yes.
John Cooper.
Yes, thank you, Tyler, for your comments. I am often confused by this discussion of AI. The discussion is often that it's something new. But regulating AI, what does it possibly mean? Now, when you give your example of the AI teddy bear, well, then you started talking about, well, what's the appropriate behavior of parents towards children? Now, of course, there's actually there was a Supreme Court case when I was a kid about a neighboring school about could Jehovah's Witness, no, not Jehovah's Witness, Amish teach their own kids, take them out of public schools. And so these kinds of issues have been with us for a long time, and we evaluate them. Now, I don't see how the issues with AI teddy bears and possibly indoctrinating students, kids, is any different than Amish having their own private schools instead of public schools. So a lot of these issues, I mean, you made this comment sector specific, and I think that's where the focus should be, is that, well, what are the principles of how parents treat their children, and then see how that applies to this technology. We have it regarding books and magazines and all sorts of material. And now the AI is just another example of media. And so I think yes, it'll tax our conceptual frameworks, but that's what new technologies always do. And so I see so this, AI, by the way, is nothing more than just fancy nonlinear least squares regression, a lot of it. So it's not all that new, really, the AI people have been very successful at their propaganda. But you look at it, it's just very advanced forms of statistics. And so this comments about how this is something brand new, I don't see that. I think a lot of these issues are really just that are going to come with technological change. Well, we've dealt with in the past, and we look at like parent-child relationships and what are the principles, and then we'll have to apply them. I don't see this as being so enormously important. And the phrase regulating AI, I think, is crazy because it's not AI that's going to be regulated. It's like, let's say, parent-child relationships and other contexts. And so that's why I like your sector-specific comment, because it's not AI itself. It's how individual contexts deal with issues.
Well, I think the power of what we have now is quite new. So the AI can converse with the child,
yeah,
at least as well as the parent can. The AI teddy bear can be built to copy the parent, a grandparent. It records, if you want it to, everything the child does. It can measure what the child responds to and evolve in such a way to maximize attention from the child. And anyone will be able to buy one at some modest price. That to me seems like a very different world than just having some parents wanting to brainwash their kids into being Amish. In terms of ease of access, number of people who might do it, and power of the thing itself, the AI teddy bear will know your kid's mood. The parent might ask the teddy bear, well, did my kid have a good day today? I don't want that to be regulated, but I will just predict any new technology that intimate, it will be regulated. And the normal principle of regulation that typically I am fine with, transparency, is extremely poorly defined when it comes to algorithms and AI. So I wonder even what good regulation can look like.
That was my question: is what do you when the phrase regulating AI comes up by anybody? I'm asking myself, well, what can you possibly mean in terms of actual regulation? It's when you try to ask people to make that concrete. What does that mean? It's unclear to me what possible regulation could be.
Well, I think a candidate regulation would be to have the Consumer Product Safety Commission somehow test the AI teddy bears and approve some and not approve the others. We already do this for lawn darts and thousands of other things. I'm not entirely happy with how that all proceeds. But there are models for what we both could do, and I would just predict almost certainly will do. So what we think proactively would be a better way to do this strikes me as a very important question, because your child's or grandchild's main source of interaction with the world now is going to be regulated. And this year it's not.
John Cochran, Chemendi, and De Castro.
Thank you as usual, Tyler, for incredibly insightful and brief talk. You do a great job of that. I'm a little darker than you, and I want to get your reaction. I don't think I could phrase this as a question. It seems like we're heading for a battle royal with AI and the regulation of AI. And the central question is, do we stop this technology? Is this going to be the famous Chinese ships of 1450, where we regulate it out of existence before it can help us? On the one hand, AI seems like catnip for regulation, because regulating AI, it's not about economics, not about who makes money, it's about censorship. AI talks, and you can make it talk the way you want it to talk. Look at Google's recent fiasco. So the catnip, the AI regulation is, as I see it, mostly going to be about making it say the things that the regulators want it to say, which is, it's about the politics of regulation, the politics of what it'll say. And it's just, your AI teddy bear, for example, you're worried about parents specially programming it to have their peculiar things. I don't think that's the worry. Imagine what the Chinese AI teddy bear is going to be like. It will instruct your child into the wonders of Xi Jinping thought, of course. And the AI teddy bear certified by the California Department of whoever certifies these things is going to impose the California Department of Education's view on things. And when your child asks, tell me about American history, it's going to tell you the politically approved version of American history. So, you know, this is the fentanyl to the original TikTok's heroin for the children. But of course, the attraction will be to you know, have it say only safe and approved things by the people the political control of the regulators. Related, the question of privacy. Now, AI, there's this whole business about who collects your data. And, you know, Europe has stringent data, and that's why, in some sense, Europe is falling way behind. And I think, as you pointed out, you might be able to have a tech company say, you know, the data that says where was Tyler Cowen's cell phone somewhere, but the data that AI collects is kind of woven in 10,000 parameters of some model. It's hard to say what it is or where it is. That's the whole point of it. And of course, for AI to be useful, it must learn from you and store this data in somewhere that you can't tell where it is. I just found out ChatGPT in Europe, ChatGPT is going to have a new memory version where it stays open and remembers your conversation, not available in Europe because, of course, it has to remember the data. On the other hand, there's almost a question here. Your AI could be stored you know, your model that remembers you, that could be stored in an encrypted place somewhere. And the real worry is the government getting access to it. So perhaps it is possible to have your AI only available to the government, but by subpoena rather than following exactly what you do. Also on the forces of evil here, the national security end, which we business with TITFI, is almost a tinfoil hat aspect. Anything Chinese is, of course, terrible and must be thrown out. So they will chime in for regulating this thing to death. On the other hand, the positive end is competition, as I can't think of a technology more open to the desire for political censorship. This one seems like a black market is the easiest, that they'll try to censor it, but it's, you know, it's a lot easier to sneak in a black market AI through a VPN than it is to sneak in, you know, rubber duckies under a tariff or something of the sort. So hopefully the competition and the fact that you mentioned, the countries who adopt it will leave the others behind. I know the Europeans are already thinking, my God, we're not growing, the US is growing. What have we done to ourselves? And perhaps that will be so I don't know. In all that, perhaps you have an idea who's going to win this gargantuan war to come.
I sympathize with your worries, but I think I'm closer to the remarks you made toward the end of your comments, that there's competition. There's also competition from open source, which is somewhat worse than GPT-4 or Claude 3. But Llama 3 is very good. And Mark promises us Llama 4 will be spectacular. And that exists now. And Chinese open source, I hear from people who know, is pretty good. It might be as good as ours. So I don't think there is a lockdown regulatory option of the type you're outlining. I get that the state of California might try to nominally pass some bill that promises to do things like that. I just don't think it's going to matter. Some of you might need to move to Virginia or Alabama. But the cat's out of the box, is my view. And widespread censorship of AI in this country, unless we control the whole internet and then downloaded versions of open source on hardware, I think we're going to let it rip, is what I'm seeing. And we'll pile a lot of ill-conceived regulation on top of that will raise costs and not accomplish very much. But 15 years from now, it'll just be a part of our lives, just like my home has an air conditioner, would be my prediction. And my air conditioner is probably also too regulated, but I have it and I turn it on and the house gets cooler.
John Richamendi.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. I have a bunch of comments, and like John, I don't know what the question is, but just a few random comments. One, Ken made an interesting point about there's nothing really new here in modern AI. I mean, people have woken up to AI in the last year and a half, but I actually think that's not true. There is something new, and it's the power of data. We never had anything like the large language models or the foundation models that we currently have. And what is amazing about them is the emergent behavior that comes out of the large language models or the generative AI models. And that I think is just a phenomenon that we never expected, and we never expected it because we never appreciated the kinds of patterns that could be internalized by the networks in the mass of data that we train them on. So that is something new. It's not new techniques, it's not new mathematics, et cetera, but it is something new that we did not have before. Another comment, I think, and Tyler, you actually said this and went by it fairly quickly, but I think it deserves emphasis that these large models, the large language models, the large generative AI, they are going to be commodified. And what that means is that the AI products, so most AI products, and what I mean by that is the new products that are coming out now. So, a product to do customer service. Those are using off-the-shelf large language models in the case of customer service. And there are a lot of them. And in some cases, the systems use 3 different large language models just to improve their performance. And so what that means is that, sure, the US is ahead of the rest of the world currently in foundation models in this technology. But I don't know that that's going to make a lot of difference from a business standpoint, because there will be a lot of businesses that will be created piggybacking on the large models. And for that, you don't need to have the capabilities that OpenAI has and that Facebook has and so forth for training these and creating these large models. So now, regulation, I guess Ken also asked, what does AI regulation look like? I think that's a great question. The problem is, I can tell you what it looks like. I mean, look at the EU's AI regulation. Look at the California legislature currently has 2 bills to regulate large language models or foundation models. And both of them, they're sort of, there's the really, really stupid one, and there's the little bit less stupid one. But these regulations tend to be regulations that demand transparency, demand, in some cases, open access. And are they good regulations? No, I think in general, when we try to regulate before we really understand a technology, and before it's been used, we just screw it up. We don't do a good job. On the other hand, if we wait too long, then we'll never be able to regulate it, because what happens is it gets a life of its own, and you can never go back. I guess I'll stop there. And Tyler, I'm sorry that none of that was a question.
Well, let me respond to one part of that. I agree with your assessment of the California bills and the EU laws, but I don't think that's the final equilibrium. So the California bills probably won't pass, or so I have been told by one large California company, who I am not allowed to mention. And it would destroy a lot of the California economy if it did, in fact. EU law often turns out to be not quite as bad as you think it's going to be, though it's almost always bad. So something like GDPR, it's enforced very, very selectively. Most Americans have up websites that can be accessed from the European Union, and those websites don't give a damn about GDPR, and no one does anything about that. It's a kind of selective cudgel that can be invoked to intimidate the large American tech companies, which is bad, to be clear, but it's not as restrictive as it seems. So Europe is breeding a lot of its own AI companies. France and Germany want those to succeed. My impression is the EU will end up as more tolerant of AI than it sounds from, say, the New York Times article one might read. We don't know yet, but I think that is the safer prediction. So
Tyler, I actually agree with that. And in fact, apparently, so if a large company is going to use your product, your AI product, you have to provide to them not proof that it satisfies the EU law, simply a letter saying we intend to make it satisfy the law, and that's generally suffices.
and perhaps some kind of payment of indulgences, right?
Right.
Symbolically or otherwise. So this is going to transform most things. You know, I've been playing around lately with my AIs, and I'm trying to come up with economics questions they can't answer. So there's like the questions in the McCluskey book. I pulled out old Harvard graduate like prelim exam questions, questions I thought of myself. There's certainly cases where it doesn't understand the full context and it screws up. But if you're a bit clear, it's very hard for me to come up with questions that it can't answer. And that to me is extremely impressive. I looked at GPT-2 not too many years ago. It completely bored me. Now we have a thing, if it doesn't pass the Turing test, it's because it's too smart and could never be mistaken for a human. Not that it isn't good enough. And I think that is a fundamentally different era in human history now. It will unfold maybe slowly, but change most things we do.
I agree.
Luciano and Justin?
Okay, great. Thank you. I do have a question. It will be a specific thing that is bothering me. And it goes like this. So it's likely, of course, we do not know, but it's likely that AI will have an impact in the job market, and a lot of people will lose jobs. Of course, the people that will keep their jobs will be able to produce more. The economy will produce more, will be richer. But my concern is exactly on the people that will lose their jobs. And so these unemployed people, perhaps we are going to have more inequality in the country, in the whole world. And my concern is what are the implications, the political implications of that? Because these people that will be unemployed and have lost some of their income will make a lot of political pressure for help from the government. And my concern is exactly what will be the implication for liberty, right? If you have a larger size or a side of the population that depends on help from the government, and how this will play out in the political arena.
Well, I have related worries, but they're a bit different than yours. I think AI will boost the demand for physical labor, which is very often lower earners currently, and damage most, what are called the word cells, people who manipulate words and images for a living. So the extreme resentment and rebellion of the upper middle class, intent on assuring that their children can do at least as well as they have done, that's what I think is under threat. And if you're a smart carpenter from Mexico, you're going to do great. I think that the wealthiest people might become wealthier because they'll, in essence, be able to mobilize AI armies to build new projects for them. But a lot of the effects will be egalitarian and a reversal of the white collar, blue collar trend that mostly we've been having since the 1970s. Now, I worry more about the rebellion of the white collar word cells than I do about the manual laborers, because I think, in a way, overall, there may be a more resentful class of people and they have more influence. But a lot of media, I think, is going to lose status. A lot of college education in many areas will be worth less. And actually being able to work and build things in the very physical, literal sense of the term, I think will be worth a lot more.
Justin?
Thanks, Tyler, for your talk, and thank you for covering this topic extensively on marginal revolution. So you talked a lot about the implications of AI for human liberty, and I thought you were going to go here, but you didn't. I guess my question would be, if AI becomes sufficiently advanced, say AGI, whatever that term means, would you agree with David Deutsch's argument that putting restrictions on the permissible range of thought of these AI advanced programs is a form of slavery or violates, say, the freedom of speech of these entities?
No, I don't agree with David. I mean, I would grant there's some very distant world where maybe the AI is sentient or we achieve artificial sentience through some other means, and then it would be an issue. But I don't see any evidence, that what we're creating now is either like that or even headed in that direction. I do think it's ultimately a glorified cash register, which I'm fine with. So I think David, being a funny kind of physicalist, has to think it's just like we are when it's not. A question I didn't consider is, what will AI mean for the liberty of animals? Is it possible that AI will make it easier not to have oppressive factory farming, or will it increase the returns to such factory farming? I'm not sure, but I would hope there's some way where AI is like an omnipresent, omnipowerful, like shepherd dog, and maybe the mammals we raise for food and dairy could have more space or more freedom. Very speculative, but I have some like mild hopes in that direction. But the stuff, it's like my computer can play chess with me. I never beat it, but if I were to beat it, I wouldn't feel bad. I'm not hurting its feelings.
Okay, Ken, second round. You're muted.
I must say that I am not so surprised about these the power of computers today, and what they do. One reason is 50 years ago, I took a course in mathematical logic, and we were led through basically the arithmetization of logic, the Gödel constructions and theorems. And from that, you kind of learn that, well, even mathematics is just a link of things that can be arithmetized. And so large language models is basically finding those links from assumptions to conclusions. So and then I think, but 30 years ago, in a book I published, I plotted the predicted trend in computer power, and also on the same plot had the predicted trend in brain power. Of course, there was no predicted trend in brain power, and they intersected about now in the mid 2020s, and that's what's happening. So a lot of this is just a matter of technology catching up now with what was possible. For example, mathematicians have been using computers to prove theorems for a long time. It's just that only now is people actually getting access to the kind of computing power to do something impressive. What bothers me about large language models, though, is what they consider to be data. So what you throw into large language models are texts of books, speeches, writings, on the web. And they regard all that data is regarded as, like, in some sense, like truth. So what if I ask a large language model, what does Mexico send us? Isn't there some chance that it's going to answer rapists? Because that's in the database. And so the problem with large language models is they're based on the syntax, that these words are then followed by these words, are then followed by these words in the database. But my impression is it doesn't understand what's being said, and it certainly doesn't make judgments about the meanings. It's a syntactical operation, not a semantic one, I guess I would say. Not that I know the definition of semantics or syntax, but that's what it seems like. So this is what worries me about large language models is that they take as data all this stuff, a lot of which is not that good. Whereas, like when I talked about the mathematics examples, the data that goes in would be facts or assumptions. It was clear, but large language models as used, I worry about what's going to come out of them.
Well, again, I think I'm more optimistic than you are. Large language models worth spending time with. It's what, 2.5 years, give or take. And the reinforcement learning applied to them is so naive and so unipurpose. The reinforcement learning, most of all, is to get them not to offend, say, a Californian workforce that is somewhat woke. Now, you can do that, but the notion that over time you'll have teams of experts, human experts, applying reinforcement learning to LLM answers in every part of human knowledge. Give it economics exams, grade those exams, teach it how to think like an economist. No one at these companies has done that. They're not close to doing that. They have actually very small staffs. They have other priorities. That's fine. But I think over some longer time horizon, you're going to have experts in just about every area sit down and work with these things. And the same kind of reinforcement learning that stops it from, say, uttering curse words will be used to just make it much smarter. And whether it's understanding you end up with, I think the answers it gives us will outperform the answers based on, say, my understanding.
John Echemendia.
Well, so I think Tyler's right that there's a lot that can be done in the what's called fine tuning of language models or whatever kind of models you're using. And yes, they can be fine tuned. Most of the work currently going on in the commercial sector is trying to figure out how to take the output of large language models and how to prevent some of the craziness, some of the hallucinations that you get. How do I guarantee that the answers are actually accurate? And that's one of the reasons that they often use multiple models at one time, because then they can compare the answers. That increases the chance that the answers are not just wild hallucinations. But I think Ken is, though, right that these large language models, they do not understand language. And they think of what they're trained on is a bunch of text that has what in common? The only thing it has in common is that somebody at some point thought it was worthwhile writing that down and posting it at a website. It's not necessarily all true. It's not necessarily interesting. It's not, et cetera, et cetera. But that's what's common. And then it's absolutely amazing what we do get out of them. I mean, I would never have expected the kind of performance that we do get out of current language models. But Ken's right. There's no understanding going on here. They don't recognize, for example, the difference. There's a nice article about thinking about a large language model producing the following completions. So suppose you start with the first man to walk on the moon was, and it'll say Neil Armstrong. Okay, it looks like it knows the fact. It understands the fact. But then suppose you say, twinkle, twinkle, little. It'll fill it in. Star. Does it know that fact? No, that's not a fact. That just happens to be a string of text that, for whatever reason, is the most high probability is that the next word is going to be star. Or think of completing a sentence having to do with, after the long journey, Frodo and Sam were glad to get back to, say, the Shire. Again, doesn't know that it's true. It's not true. It's a piece of fiction. But the large language model doesn't treat it any differently. Doesn't treat it any differently than it treats Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star or the Neil Armstrong example. There's no understanding going on here. There is simply statistics, simply completions. And we have to keep that in mind. And
I would say we're learning that understanding is overrated. And again,
do we
as your
understand?
own remarks started with, if you just stack models, I know the token cost goes up a lot, but you can basically eliminate hallucinations now. So we know how to do it. We just have to get the cost down. I just think there'll be a lot more progress now that the number of people working on this is not just a mere handful, but it's become an open access thing for most of the world. And I'm not sure what intellectual tasks they won't be able to perform in less than 20 years. That's highly unclear to me. That could be close to the empty set. Can they dribble a basketball? Different set of questions. But thinking stuff through, seeing more connections, having near perfect memory, they're already very, very impressive. You know, load a PDF and ask it to explain the paper to you. You know, it does better than most human PhD economists would do.
yeah, and just think, I mean, I agree. And just think how amazing that is. You would never, if you understand this technology and what it's doing, simply pattern recognition, completion of sentences, that's what they're all doing. Now, where they differ is basically in the amount of data and which data they're trained on. Now,
synthetic data might work. Keep that in mind. Probably it will.
So let me just finish that. What you said is what's amazing is just how much. So you can speculate. You say, well, I don't know what kind of intellectual task it won't be able to do in 5 years or in 2 years, for that matter. That's really remarkable when you understand what's going on at the nuts and bolts level.
People, you know, companies will buy more and more data that's not just what's on the internet. But 10, 20 years from now, you'll have devices trained on so much privately created data, whether it's archives of corporations or emails of law firms. There's just a lot more they can access that will cost them money. It could be slow, but there's a lot of room for improvement there based on just ordinary market transactions for data.
I wanted to ask a question also, Tyler. So I wanted to go back to the implications for liberty, because it seems to me that it's very clear that one of the obvious applications of this technology is going to enable governments to monitor the population and control the population via, maybe a social credit system or something like that. And I wonder if you can talk about that risk and how is this technology being used, say, by China to control the population, and what can we do to mitigate that risk in the West and in the US specifically?
Well, as you mentioned, China already has been doing a version of that for some while, even before high-powered large language models. I don't know how to get them out of that. In this country, I don't see that as the American way of regulating. I think we're less coherent than that, and this turns out to be a good thing. So when we overregulate something, the environment or banking or construction, it does not tend to be with top-down, all-powerful surveillance. It tends to be with too many kludges, too many obstacles, too many costs scattered along the way, with no overall coherent plan. So I think my prediction, insofar as I have one, is we will misregulate AI in the same way. And America becoming more like China, it's not really on my bingo card, as they say. I think we'll just do something more federalistic. And it won't achieve any coherent end. The Chinese, I disagree with their end, but they do achieve some end. Like if you jaywalk in Shanghai, they just take the money from your account. Like that does work. I don't think we're going to do that. I don't think American people would put up with it. I think some version of the median voter theorem still is going to hold.
We have a last question by Justin.
Hey, Tyler, just very much related to the last question. Daron Acemoglu wrote an article last year saying, I think it was titled, like, Would AI-enabled communism work? His basic argument is that AI, if it's sufficiently advanced, will basically overcome the Hayekian knowledge problem. Do you agree?
I think he framed it the wrong way to begin with, and I think Hayek somewhat framed it the wrong way to begin with. The fundamental problem of central planning is how incentive and knowledge problems interact. So it's a funny thing, the Soviet Union, like prices were always too low. They were never too high. There were always shortages. Like in some sense, they solved the knowledge problem. They knew how to put the price too low. They just had terrible incentives. And then none of the prices communicated a lot of information. If you start with incentives as the fundamental idea behind the failures of socialism, I think AI, if anything, makes those worse, but it's not going to solve them. If you simply talk about knowledge, then okay, you can debate, will AI give the planner enough knowledge? But incentives was the fundamental driver of the government failure to begin with. So I'm not optimistic about that at all. And I think Acemoglu was quite wrong.
Okay, looks like Ken wants to ask the last question. Please try to be concise, Ken. You're muted.
I am also amazed by the power of computation. No question, and endorse using it. Recently, I heard some very silly talk about regulation. There was an artificial intelligence policy conference here a couple weeks ago, and some people presented the concern about AI robot soldiers. And then somebody said, oh, there's some international agreements now that any sort of artificial intelligence weapon system is going to have a human in the loop. And I'm thinking how silly that is, because war has its own logic. And somebody's going to go ahead and create autonomous soldiers. And any sort of international regulation against it is just foolish to think about. So that was a case where the so-called talk of regulation they did not understand that you can't regulate, you can't sort of slow down that kind of application of AI in any way. I'm kind of reflecting Ed Teller's attitude that somebody's going to invent the H-bomb, so we should do it first. So anyway, so that's that is a dark aspect of AI. Hopefully we can avoid it, but that's something to worry about.
Yeah, there is no such international agreement that a human has to be in the loop. And the United States Armed Forces are right now debating dropping their own previously internally imposed requirement that humans always have to be in the loop. I predict at some point they do this. They may not even ever tell us. What does it mean, human in the loop? Well, at some point you're pressing a start button. When the atom bomb finally blew up over Hiroshima, at that final moment, there was no human in the loop. The thing was reacting as it was built to react. I would just say I have the general worry that all of history is an arms race, and now we have a new one. You always ought to be worried. I want the U.S. to win it. I'm delighted we have a head start. Not sure how much we can keep that head start. But we all should be somewhat terrified that there's a new arms race before us. There'll be all sorts of talk about international agreements. I don't think any of those will be done. We live in an era where those earlier agreements are falling apart. Like the WTO can't even get anything done. So how are US, China to agree? That old system we had with the Soviets, the hotline, that if you think someone fired a nuclear missile, you call up Brezhnev and you ask him, hey, did you all bomb us? China won't even set one of those up with us. So, what kind of agreements here are we expecting to have? So, I think we need to just go ahead on our own and unilaterally do what we think is the best thing.
Okay, thank you very much, Tyler. That was great, very interesting, always very refreshing to get some of your optimism. Thank you for making it to this presentation. Thank you, everybody. Next week, we'll host Roger Pilke, who will probably talk about climate change and climate policy. So you're welcome to attend. Thank you.
Nice to see you all. Thank you. Take care. Bye.